Obby, please put me in the video. Ty, bro.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. The YouTube members have spoken and they decided on Frost Death Knight for this video. I have often called Frost Death Knight one of the hardest specs to DPS with, and a lot of people seem to disagree with me on that, and that's fine. Allow me to explain why I think Frost Decay is on the harder end of the DPS spectrum. It is a rotation. That's it, that's my reasoning. There is a little bit of priority in said rotation, but we're talking about a continuous rotation where you can't really afford to make any mistakes. If you do, your rotation will be crippled until the next instance of that specific spell. On top of that, there is a chance that your Pestilence misses, even at best in slot, just because of the spell hit rating cap on Pestilence. Ah, Topali is gonna try to beat me. I missed the fucking Pestilence! That is some fuck. However, besides Pestilence missing, Frost Decay is still a lot of fun. It is very good. It has higher than average utility that sadly does not stack, so taking more than one Frost Decay, or one Blood Decay tank with Icy Talons, or even an Enhancement Shaman with improved Wind Fury totems will provide a weakness in your raid. Because their utility is gonna overlap with each other, and what you want is a raid full of classes that synergize with each other. Without any further ado, let's begin with the basics as we always do. Starting off, you immediately get to make a decision. Do you want threat reduction in the blood tree, which could be very good for a progressive guild? Taking this talent will also give you some much needed obliterate crit chance, or you can go for the Bloodcake Blade on the unholy side of things. This is preferable if you are armor penetration capped. Whichever you pick, make sure that you get Epidemic, Ravenous Death and Virulence in the holy tree. The Frost tree should look like this. We basically take all of the one-handed damage increasing talents and avoid the tanky boy talents. Note that Black Ice is on 2 out of 5, this is because Subversion or Bloodcake Blade will provide you with a much more significant DPS increase. In terms of utility, you are providing the 20% melee haste from Icy Talons like previously stated. You will also be using the Horn of the Winter as a part of your rotation. Frost Death Knights also have by far the best melee interrupt in the game. It costs nothing, it is off global cooldown, it is just perfection. Moving on to Glyphs, we have a standard setup of Disease, Frost Strike and Obliterate. There are no alternatives to take for major Glyphs. For minor Glyphs, you'll want Glyph of Pestilence. This is a must-have. Besides that, I like to run Blood Tap to relieve my healers a little bit, and Raise That because fuck reagents. As far as your stat priority is concerned, you'll want to cap hit rating and expertise first and foremost. Just like any other class, if you cannot hit your enemy, you are not dealing any damage. After that is when I personally struggled a little bit to achieve my caps, but with big endgame gear, it should be achievable to get an armor penetration cap alongside your hit and expertise cap. With my armor penetration then capped out, I'm gonna stack some strength to make my unbreakable armor more valuable. Now for some macros that I like to use and that I would recommend you to use as well. Oh yeah, macaroni time! The most important macro has to be any of the basic abilities combined with Rune Strike. Rune Strike is commonly a tank ability, but if we happen to dodge or perhaps parry a tick of the Merogar Bone Storm for example, we can then drop a very inexpensive, hard-hitting Rune Strike that'll deal like 18k damage for the price of 20 runic power. It is important to note that Rune Strike is a melee attack modifier, much like Heroic Strike. That's why we can macro it in our spells. It does not cost a global cooldown by itself. Cast Icy Touch, cast Rune Strike, cast Blood Strike, cast Rune Strike. You'll basically want to include Rune Strike in every single spell. This also goes for /start attack. This will start your auto attack, even if your spell is unusable because of cooldowns or lack of resources. /cast Icy Touch, /cast Rune Strike, /start attack. There's also cast Blood Tap and cancel Aura Blood Tap. More on this in the next chapter. Another staple of my guides is Cancel Aura Hand of Protection and Cancel Aura Divine Intervention. This will make it so that paladins cannot troll you with any of their shenanigans. Keep in mind that if you have to keep Hand of Protection up, like in TOG C25 Heroic on the Nubarak, you'll want to stop using your spells for a little bit, or you're gonna risk cancelling it at a bad time. Frost Death Knights have this beautiful cooldown called Unbreakable Armor, which is on a 1-minute cooldown. You'll want to combine that with your engineering hyperspeed accelerators. The strength and the haste go together like my toy dragon and my sister's Barbie dolls. A few quality of life macros. Cast, Mod Shift, Blood Boil, what the fuck is this double dot thing, I don't know. Death and Decay. This is a nice button saver. It'll put 2 spells on 1 button. If you hold down shift you can use Blood Boil, if you do not hold down shift you get Death and Decay. Comfy. Just like my toy dragon chilling with my sister's Barbie dolls. Or easy peasy ghoul aggro on the Lich King encounter. Don't taunt or grip them off of your warriors or off tank, but everybody else is fair game of course. This is exactly what my toy dragon taught on my sister's Barbie dolls too. Cast at mouse over Death Grip, cast at mouse over Dark Command. Getting melee attacked by something that can't easily kill you will give you the chance to parry or dodge, so keep the enemy in front of you. Dodging and parrying of course is gonna activate Rune Strike, and we're full circle on this chapter, so moving on. Choo-choo! The rotation, and oh boy is it ever a rotation. Let's begin with the priority list instead, since it is a much smaller topic and it will help you understand how to prioritize your rotation. Keep up your diseases. Everything that you do is so much stronger with your diseases up. What normally is an 11k obliterate crit, with diseases that can become a 19k crit. Obliterate should always be used when possible, of course when your diseases are applied. This is your main damage spell. When all of your runes are on cooldown and you cannot use Obliterate, use Frost Strike. Every other rune rotation, you're gonna wanna refresh your dots with a combination of Pestilence plus Blood Strike. Or if you have Unbreakable Armor up, you can use Pestilence in combination with Blood Tap and Unbreakable Armor. Once again, make sure that it's macroed with your hyperspeed accelerators. Now let's talk about that macro for Blood Tap that I warned you about before. Blood Tapping gives you a 20-second buff. In that time, one of your blood runes is a death rune, and if you do not cancel aura it after an Obliterate, it is gonna cost you some serious trouble later down the line. So, when you go for Unbreakable Armor, you will want to use Blood Tap in order to do that. Keep in mind that after you spend your left death rune, that you need to cancel aura that Blood Tap. With every Obliterate successfully spent, there is a chance to proc Rime. This will give you a buff called Freezing Fog. This buff allows us to use our primary area of effect ability, Howling Blast, for free. Howling Blast combined with Killing Machine is probably the most intense instant area of effect ability in the game. I've personally done 200k crits in the Ruby Sanctum 25 Heroic. However, as good as it is in area of effect, it is also very bad in a single target situation. So in a single target situation, you're gonna wanna use Killing Machine procs on Frost Strikes, not Howling Blast. With Obliterate, Frost Strike, Unbreakable Armor, Howling Blast, with the proc of course all on cooldown, there are still a few spells that you're gonna wanna use. Horn of the Winter should be used before Raise Dead. This will give you a smoother rotation since Horn of the Winter is on such a low cooldown. After Horn of the Winter, you can of course use Raise Dead to fill some global cooldowns. I'm going to keep the actual rotation part very short. With the information provided earlier in this chapter, you can pause the video and see this giant wall of text in order to try to understand the opening rotation. Being able to think on your feet is way more important than knowing 1, 2, 3. So please try to understand the priority list that a class has and incorporate that into its rotation. Doing that will lead to greater insight on how to play your class. Now here you can take a look at like the first 20-30 seconds of a fight. It's a mess, trust me. Stick to the priority list. It's so much easier to understand. Normally we get to talk about Hand of Sacrifice, Innervate, Misdirection or whatever, but the DK is lacking active utility besides Horn of the Winter, which as you know by now should be used in your rotation anyway. Death Grip should be used to stack up enemies so that the group can burst them down. There's a little bit of utility. Since there isn't much utility to talk about, let's go over the defensive cooldowns as well. Your primary defensive cooldown is going to be Icebound Fortitude. It will reduce damage taken by a flat amount of 30% and make you immune to incoming stuns. It cannot be used while stunned, as it can be in 9.0.2 Shadowlands. Anti-Magic Shell comes to mind when you think about Death Knights in PvP. It is a very self-explanatory spell. You block magical damage. This can also be used in various ways, and I will elaborate on this in the tips and tricks section. Army of the Dead should be used offensively, but if you happen to have it off cooldown and you are in dire need of a defensive cooldown, you can use it to get around about 20% damage reduction. This will scale with your gear, because 25% of your strength will be converted to parry hating due to the forceful deflection passive. Let's move on to the self-healing. Death Strike with diseases up can be used to heal about 20% of your maximum health per strike. However, you will lose DPS if you use this to heal, so just die and blame your healers instead. Also, Death Pact can be used to heal a big chungus amount of your health. It will negatively impact your DPS more so than a Death Strike, however. Take this imaginary example. You have a full tier 10 set. You are at Deathbringer Sourfang. You are taking deep breaths. Mouth in, nose out. Mouth in, nose out. DBM pull is in 20 seconds. Because of the 4 set, it is worth it to time your Army of the Dead plus your Death and Decay, preferably underneath the boss. But you can also drop your Death and Decay away from a boss like Festergut, which has a proximity pull instead of a hard timer like DBS or the Lich King. You'll start the fight with barely refreshed runes and a nice damage boost from the 4 set to boot. Anti-Magic Shell can be used to increase your DPS, but how? If you absorb magical damage, then you gain runic power, which can then be used for frost strikes. This is especially useful in these situations. Marrowgar's Flames, Lady Death Whisperers, Death and Decay, go in AFK on Gunship Battle, Bloodboil, Mark of the Fallen Champion on DPS, Festercuts, Malleable Goo, Rot Faces, Big Ooze, Slime Spray, Slime Bottle, or a combination of all debuff, PP's Choking Gas Bombs, Malleable Goo, and Red-Green damage, PPC's Movement Stack, Shock Vortex damage, Firebomb damage, Kinetic Bomb damage, BQL's Air Phase, you will be immune to the fear, you can use AMS right when you get flames and it will stop you from flaming, BDW's Archmage and Blazing Skeleton damage as well as the Avon Disease, Synchrogosa's melee debuff, Bliss Wrinkled and Ice Skin damage, Lich King's Infest, Remorseless Winter and Wicked Spirits, Alion's Fire Combustion Consumption damage mitigation, and more important, Spell Absorption. Spell Absorption is something we should highlight. It allows you to effectively ignore a spell, like the BQL Flames as shown here. This also works for the combustion and consumption even on Heroic. Another spell with a boatload of uses is Army of the Dead. I'll quickly list them because this chapter, at least in the script, is getting a little long. That, coincidentally, is exactly what my imaginary high school girlfriend told me about my penis. Precast it on Marrowgar, precast it on Lady, go AFK on Gunship, precast it on DBS, precast it on Festergut, precast it on Rotface, use it on a transition on PP Heroic so your goals share the damage from the green ooze. If it's normal, precast it on BPC. You can either precast it on BQL or use it when she flies into the air. I can't do this a second time. I am sorry guys, I can't do it. Here's the list, you can read it. Chains of Ice can also be used to slow down enemies. Yeah, this can be very useful, especially for the Shambling Horror on the Lich King encounter, or if you want to help with the Blood Beasts on DBS. Chaining 1 or 2 enemies is gonna be a lot safer than melee DPSing them, getting aggro and consequently giving the boss a bunch of energy, or even worse, dying. Death Grip can be used to interrupt an enemy spellcast that is mostly used in RDFs, but it can still be useful in the VDW encounter as well if your Mind Freeze and Strangulate are on cooldown. Pre-potting is also always a nice trick. Haste potions are pretty decent on the Frost Decay. We've already talked about Rune Strikes, a synergy with Death Grip or Taunt in order to get a little bit more damage. And this is just a reminder, I guess. Every second and a half is one input. You are ready. You've gone over the theory 1,000 times, and you can see perfection in your mind. DBM Pool 12, Horn of the Winter. DBM Pool 11, Death and Decay. DBM Pool 10, Army of the Dead. DBM Pool 1, Potion of Speed, plus Raise Dead. DBM Pulse 0. Exhale. What follows is a perfect rotation, but that's not enough. Oh no, you're gonna wanna do some more improvisation by using the priority list we discussed earlier. Should everything go just perfectly, you'll be able to get a triple obliterate in every other rotation. But that's not enough. You will soon find that you are missing pestilences because of your greed. Getting that one extra frost strike in, or that one extra horn of the winter even, can cost you your diseases and kill your DPS. The constant time pressure giving you sweaty hands, the RNG involved not being too frustrating or annoying to deal with, unless you miss a pestilence. That is some fuck. I've played quite a few classes for quite a long time, but none are as refreshing to come back to every now and then as a Frost Death Knight. I always feel like I'm relearning the class and picking up on new things, and I did exactly that when I made this guy too. Overall, this class is just a joy to play, and unlike some specs looking at you enhancing them and Shaman, it is actually pretty decent. They are in the limbo of top 5 to 10 DPS classes, but I've seen and been in raids where the stars aligned, I tryharded very hard, didn't make any mistakes, and I got rewarded for it with a top 5 DPS spot. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is satisfactory. We've done Unholy, Frost, and also Blood Decay DPS. That means that we're done with Death Knight specs. Oh yeah! And that is all I got on Frost Death Knight for 3.3.5, more specifically on Warmanes 3.3.5. I hope you've enjoyed the video or learned something. If not, feel free to leave a dislike. A big thank you to the YouTube members for picking this class for this video. Keep an eye out on the YouTube community tab if you are a YouTube member, so that you can help decide what the next project on this channel is going to be. And thanks everyone else for watching. I'ma head to bed, so say goodnight to the bad guy. I'll just play the clip. Honestly, I'm not an Al Pacino type.
So say goodnight to the bad guy. Go on.
Pestilence, yes!